Hello, Internet. My name is Chamomile.
And I've been informed that I am legally required to refer to myself as Requiem.
I have to assume that the details of that legal decision are something you've been advised by your lawyer not to disclose.
Indeed.
Tarzan, having been raised by gorillas, has only a shaky grasp of the otherwise completely universal language of English.
It's funny, in the book, he actually learns to read English before he learns to speak it, and when he does learn to speak it, he speaks it perfectly.
Friends. Right, my friends. There's two of them. The loud one is Donald.
Edgar Rice Burroughs did not understand how language acquisition works.
You know what? Never mind.
There's a whole extended sequence where he finds some books in the abandoned cabin his parents built, and is able to figure out how to read them without actually being able to speak English or even have really any verbal language. Like, I guess the apes kind of have some sort of weird proto-language, since they're not like real apes. They're like a fictional species that Edgar Rice Burroughs made up.
Really?
Did he just curse?
No. It is ape grunting.
Ah.
Yeah, Book Tarzan
Sure I understand, but
is...
show me.
there are some minor differences from the movie.
Tarzan, go.
And I'm Sora. Tarzan go, Sora go.
Sora, by the way, is like the most asshole American tourist about this whole thing. You know, he tries to make himself understood by speaking loudly and slowly in a language that Tarzan, you know, like, that his vocabulary is his vocabulary, man. You're not going to fix it by yelling at him. And he's basically mocking Tarzan's accents. Or dialect, whatever you want to call it. So, yeah.
Hope Sora's okay.
Who needs them? We can find the kid without them, huh?
Disney made the entirely reasonable decision to have the apes just be gorillas.
Yeah. There were a lot of entirely reasonable decisions made in... And this is, like, a pretty forgettable Disney movie, Tarzan was. But, I mean... If we're going to hold it to the low standards of better than the books, then, Okay, so on the one hand, we have lost Goofy. But, on the bright side, we have also lost Donald.
We got Tarzan.
Right. So, like, overall, I'm going to say this is an improvement. Grab the... There we go.
Hey, Cam.
Yeah? Yeah. So here we have the jungle skateboarding minigame.
Fun.
Because skateboarding was all the rage in the 90s. So Tarzan would skateboard on moss in a way that somehow never, you know, shredded his skin from his feet.
I realized that was supposed to be a skateboarding thing, but I guess that makes sense.
In the extended commentary, which, you know, from 1995 to 2005, that got real popular.
Jane.
Oh, yeah, and the Tarzan
Oh, and who's this?
things, they had it on, like, the Disney Channel. They would put little commercials where they would...
English. So then, obviously you're not related to Tarzan.
What was your first
Why
clue?
is it to study the gorilla?
Highly doubtful.
Sora, Goofy, Donald.
So they were separated for like
Clouds. Not much much use for hunting.
10 seconds. Like, I don't see what the narrative purpose of that was.
Studying them, not hunting them. This is research.
This is literally approximately 7 minutes.
Well, the more the merrier. Do make yourselves at home.
Although it's funny they made Jane British in the cartoon.
Anyway, I'm staying. Huh?
Oh, is she not in the...
We found.
She's American, so Tarzan's English, like in the loosest sense of the word, since he's Lord Greystoke. But Jane is American. I feel like a lot of adaptations make her British for whatever reason.
I mean... Sora is absolutely in the right, not just morally, but also in the sense of, yeah, I'll let you tag along. Let's be clear here, Donald. You are useless to this party. But Tarzan is, you know, it is a British book.
It is
And-
not.
Is it not?
It is American.
Oh. His name sounds very British.
He's Texan.
I object to this. This is ruining my image of Texas.
Edgar Rice Burroughs is Texan.
That does make it weird. Because like my thinking was, well, okay, the book is British in origin, which I guess just got into my head because Jane is English in the Disney version. But yeah, and since Tarzan is not meaningfully from any human culture, then...
Like, he's English in the loosest sense of the word, but, like, he's not really English, like, meaningfully.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole thing, like, from a literary criticism sense where, like, yeah, he is English, and it is an important point that he's English, but also, like, actually looking at the text, he's not really English.
It is important to the writer, and therefore to the narrative, that he is English. But, you know, practically speaking, he is Gorillanese. Which, by the way, we have the Beauty and the Beast tea set here. And we're going to meet
like that.
Beast later in the show, or later in the game. Which, in Tarzan, they actually had the Beauty and the Beast tea set there, which was just, you know, a fun little gag. They reproduced that in Kingdom Hearts, and now it raises serious questions. Because those characters exist.
So is this world, like, because the whole thing is either these separate worlds, but there's a Union Jack on this flagpole, which kind of implies that this is the world, like, that is the real world.
Yeah, this is just Earth. That it's just Earth in the 1880s.
Just raises a lot of questions about how this universe functions.
And the official name of this world is Deep Jungle. Which... Okay, but Jane is not from the Deep Jungle. Okay, how do I get out of that goddamn tent?
Now, does Tarzan appear in the later... I assume he doesn't appear in the later games at all.
None of the ones that I have played. It's possible that he recurs in some of the ones that I missed, like the weird handheld ones that are not actually spin-offs, they're actually plot critical, because fuck you.
Because Tarzan is not a public domain character, technically. Like, and I think at some point the Burroughs estate got the rights back from Tarzan. That's why he doesn't appear in a lot. The Disney version doesn't appear in a lot anymore. Because
I don't think that's how I do it.
which is one of those frustrating things, because Tarzan is this 100-year-old character written by a man who's been dead for 70 years. And even though the books are technically public domain, like, the name is trademarked, and a lot of, like, the Burroughs estate will go after you. like there was a comic book that was just like a comic book adaptation of the books, but it wasn't like the actual text of the books, and they went after the comic book writers, the company that published the comic books, and some sort of agreement was reached, but it was still like, we're at the point they should not have had to ask for permission.
Yeah. Like, there's absolutely no justification. There's no reasonable way that that taking Tarzan out of copyright, putting it into the public domain, like, that is overwhelmingly past the point where it could not possibly deter any creator from, making
Like,
their work. Like,
the thing about Tarzan is, like, he's past his prime as a concept. Like, I don't think there's been a successful Tarzan movie since the Disney adaptation, and I don't think there's been a successful live action adaptation since like the 60s. Like, there was a live adaptation in the 80s that bombed, and one in the 90s that bombed. So I don't know when the last successful live action adaptation even was. And like the whole, Cam and I have talked about this, but like a lot of Tarzan, the actual book, is like deeply questionable nowadays. Like, it's really deeply uncomfortable to read. Cam, I don't think has read the actual book, but I have, and it is not a comfortable read in 2020. Let me tell you. So I guess like we could start off by asking, so Cam, in the language of the apes, so what does Tarzan?
Entirely wholesome protagonist, which shall never in any way be uncomfortable to read or think about. It's a very efficient language.
I'll give you a hint. Tarzan picks his name, and he picks a trait that he feels distinguishes him from apes.
We're talking about text and writing in the 1880s, so it's got to be white skin, right? I'm cheating.
Yes, Tarzan means Tarzan means white skin. It's deeply uncomfortable. Rather than choosing like smooth skin or clever or like stands upright, it's white skin. It's embedded in the character.
I mean, it's embedded in the character in a made-up language that, like, if you want to discard that from your adaptation, you can immediately. This is the most annoying side quest in all of this world, by the way, which is that there is a slide around here somewhere that I've got to find all of them. I forget where the last one is. It's around here somewhere.
Well, with Tarzan, at least, this version of Tarzan, I feel like they did a pretty good job of getting rid of most of the deeply uncomfortable elements of the book.
Yeah, no, I mean, this Tarzan has almost nothing in common with the original Tarzan. It has the basic premise of being raised by some kind of primate, because bear in mind that they aren't even gorillas in the original book. So being raised by a non-human primate in the jungle. That is the limit of the similarities between... And I guess, like, the character of Jane Porter technically does appear.
Well, Tarzan?
Where are my
Well, the thing about Tarzan is, like, you really want to have him spend a lot of time outside of the jungle. Like, I feel like the whole point of this character is that you do the old fish out of the water trope. But the book, at least the first book, he spends just barely at the end is when he gets out of Africa. And there's like a little point where he goes to Wisconsin to talk to Jane because he wants to marry her. Does not spend a lot of time outside of the jungle, which seems like the whole point of having a character like this.
And then in the Disney movie, there is one scene where he wears English clothes on a ship, and he is about, like, maybe 500 yards off the coast before he turns around because plot.
Go see Kerchak.
Kerchak?
He must be the leader. Perfect. I'll go along as an escort.
Because like the last like part of the book, Tarzan is when Tarzan explicitly kind of rejects being human. He says, "My mother was an ape. I don't know who my father was." So he rejects humanity, but like that doesn't work unless he gets a much more intimate association with humanity than he does in the book. Like he's such a limited interaction with humanity after having this big thing of like wanting to be a human instead of an ape, that the rejection of humanity really doesn't land like it should.
Yeah, it's funny. Like in their weird pop song they had instead of regular Disney music, they really call attention to how, you know, Tarzan is of two worlds, and yet he never visits one of those worlds. Like, representatives of that world show up, and it's enough to make the plot work, but...
Oh, hey, the most dangerous animal in Africa. And we just jumped on it.
Yeah, nah. In this game, they are used entirely as platforms.
That raises a lot of questions.
It's fine. They're fine. Just don't even worry about it.
Kerchak, please listen to me. I know the nesting grounds are secret, but I trust them. You see, I want to help them because they need us.
And bear in mind, the impetus for this plot is that they're looking for Riku, Kairi, and Mickey. And Donald is already pretty sure that Mickey isn't here, so mainly just Riku and Kairi. And they have no particular reason to believe that they are in this specific spot of the jungle, except that they are combing over literally the entire jungle.
So they really didn't have to. Like, Tarzan could have just gone into the nesting grounds and be like,
Yeah.
no, there's no humans there. Or weird mouse people. So
Like,
here's
we
a
did
question.
see Kairi earlier on, so it makes sense that Sora is sticking around looking for her. But there's no reason why Sora needs to personally go into the nesting grounds for this.
Here is a question. And I actually wrote an undergrad paper trying to answer this question. So, why does Tarzan wear a loincloth?
I mean,
Because there's a diegetic answer, but there's also a non-diegetic answer. And we know what the non-diegetic answer is. It's because this is a children's cartoon.
right. Is that... What creative direction are you suggesting for this,
But like in any form of Tarzan, like even in the book, like he makes the
Sure.
conscious choice to when he finds his parents' cabin. Because up to this point he's been raised by apes. He's been naked the whole time. He does make the conscious choice. He wants to be more human-like, and he chooses to make some clothing. But why does he choose to make a loincloth? Like he shouldn't have any conception of nudity.
Yeah, he should have no particular areas he wants to cover up. So
He's also being written by a white Texan in like the early 1900s. So why did Edgar Rice Burroughs make that choice? Like, there's some importance to that part of the body, obviously, compared to the rest of his body. It's this Edgar Rice Burroughs' own mores being inserted into this world where it actually doesn't make sense. Because in the modern Western culture, like, we place significance on that part of the body.
Tarzan's gorilla dick was just so big that after hanging out there, he'd smack people with it. So, what is the reason? Is there...
Well, because Edgar Rice Burroughs is a white male Westerner living in the 1900s, so for him, to be nude is to have that part of your body uncovered. He didn't really think of like, because we place huge significance on that part of the body, and in the paper I wrote, it was also talking about film versions of Tarzan, and one of the versions we'd watched was the, I want to say 1984 version of Tarzan, Greystoke starring Christopher Lambert, and that has the child version, and the child versions of Tarzan before they're played by Christopher Lambert are just completely nude because they're children, so there's not anything inherently sexual about their nudity. It's when you get Christopher Lambert, he has to be fully covered. If that makes sense.
I'm surprised this was the 80s?
1984, yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised that was the paradigm in the 80s. Like, I'm not surprised to learn that that is a way that it worked at some point, but...
Once Tarzan is an adult man, him being nude has different connotations.
Right.
They don't have the scene in the book where he's made this conscious choice to try to emulate humanity.
And, upon looking at all of the clothes of the, presumably clothed neck to toe humans in the pictures, he comes to the conclusion that the loincloth specifically is, what he needs to make.
When he makes a loincloth, presumably all the pictures he's looking at are pictures of people wearing pants. So...
Right.
He doesn't actually try to fashion pants. And then you get another interesting question, is why is Tarzan clean-shaven? Like...
For that matter, how is Tarzan clean-shaven?
In the book, he's like 20, 21, I want to say. So, like, he should at very least have, like, stubble. Like, he should have facial hair. He should not be completely smooth on his face. But that's another thing where this is Edgar Rice Burroughs poking in. Because Tarzan isn't just a feral child. He is the Western white man. And at the time, the association of beards were seen as very, like, Near Eastern. So if somebody has a beard, they're Turkish or Russian. Somebody from England or America should not have a full beard. So at some point in the book, he does, when he finds his parents' cabin, he does make the conscious decision to shave his face with a knife. Though in a lot of movies, they will not even have that scene. Like, I don't think this movie has it, and the 1984 version, they just have him be clean-shaven the whole time. They don't really discuss that he's made a conscious choice to start shaving.
Which is a weird choice to make. Like, shaving is not an easy thing to do without the support of civilization. Like, just hacking off all the hair with a knife. For starters, I find it very hard to imagine that the first time he ever attempted to shave, doing so without any kind of shaving cream, using a knife, Tarzan was able to get a clean shave. Like, what?
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense, but like we mentioned earlier, like, he's not within the world, he should not really meaningfully be English, but within the context of being a book written by Edgar Rice Burroughs, the fact that he is English, that he's white, everything is deeply important to him as a character. Like, Tarzan comes out of a period of time in the early 1900s where the big concern people had was that the Western man had become too civilized, that he had lost, like, a sort of masculine brutishness that was necessary for prosperity, that he'd become feminized by, like, white working class jobs. And so this is an attempt to sort of be a version of the white Western man who still has that sort of wildness that is getting lost as society becomes more industrialized And the fact that, like, not only is he English, he's an English aristocrat, and people don't really. This usually is downplayed in a lot of adaptations, but he's kind of like a autodidact. He's like kind of portrayed as being like this genius figure because he's an aristocrat. That's why he like learns languages so fast, and he's able to mimic the sound of any animal because he's this English aristocrat. And as we all know, aristocrats are just awesome at everything.
Yeah.
Aristocracy literally means rule by the best. But the reason Burroughs has his character not only be a white man, but a white English aristocrat is because it's England. England is sort of where Burroughs is looking to sort of this sort of foundational whiteness, but also sort of like right to rule. So he has to be an aristocrat.
And that is sort of like why I had, like, why this feels like a British book so much to me, is that there's this emphasis on aristocracy. Not that I've read it directly, but I knew about that element, and it turns out like that is not an American vibe, right? Like,
but I think like it might be like a specifically early 1900s reactionary American vibe, because you see it in Lovecraft too. He has a lot of characters who retreat to England to sort of seek security and whiteness, like in The Rats in the Walls. The character, after losing his manor essentially in the antebellum South during the Civil War, migrates to England. Like I think you might be seeing white reactionary writers in this time look to England as sort of this more secure place of white supremacy. Like,
I do not know nearly enough about the time period to say one way or the other.
Because Lovecraft is like a contemporary of Burroughs. I don't know that they were in communication at all, but I always feel like him and Burroughs and the guy who wrote the Conan novels are kind of a trifecta of sort of the culture of that pulp era.
Conan, the Conan guy. Oh, what's his name?
It's Howard something.
Robert E. Howard, I think?
Robert E. Howard.
Yeah. Him and Lovecraft were definitely in communication. They were friends-ish. I still love, and there's no telling for sure whether or not it's true, but the story goes that Robert E. Howard became less racist because of Lovecraft's influence, where, like, you know, he heard Lovecraft talking about it, and he was like, holy shit, is that what that sounds like? And he backed away from it a little bit. And, I mean, you know, the Conan books are absolutely soaked in racial essentialism. So, it's kind of saying something that Robert E. Howard, you know, heard Lovecraft talk, and he was like, whoa. You don't need to be that racist, man.
Now, Miss Porter, as I told you, I was not aiming at the gorilla.
You are not to go near the gorillas again.
Oh, because of one mishap. Come now. What am I doing?
The other interesting thing about Tarzan, the use of the loincloth, he's this near naked figure, but he's pretty much, he's very desexualized. In the book, like, he has this romance with Jane, but like he's not really looked at or described as like a sexual figure. The movies tend to sexualize him a little bit more, just because it's kind of hard to not when you have somebody running around essentially in their underwear the whole movie. But it's a sort of, and it's this very American thing of where you have, because the Tarzan book is very violent. Tarzan kills a lot of people pretty brutally, but it's also, it's very desexualized. It's that trend that people have talked about in American culture for decades.
Right.
All their little monkeys.
Yeah. The best thing about the Heartless is that they've got new little designs for just about every world. They didn't really have... I mean, there were new Heartless in Alice in Wonderland, but they were mainly the same as the old ones. They're fairly generic Heartless that appear on many worlds. But yeah, here in the Jungle World, they've got Jungle Heartless.
And another funny thing about Tarzan is even though he's chosen this name, White Skin, whenever the book describes him, he's specifically described as having nut brown skin.
I mean, he's outdoors all the time, so that makes sense, but also... Like, where then did he get the name? How does he know about this concept of whiteness?
It's because he's being written by a racist white Texan.
Well...
Because in the book, he runs into black Africans before he ever runs into an actual white person.
Boy, does he ever.
What?
Boy, does he ever. Because, yeah, that is a whole other rabbit hole.
Yes, I don't even know whether we want to go down that specific rabbit hole or not. Should we?
I mean, I'm no good at reading this kind of thing, so I leave that entirely in your hands.
Oh my god. I mean, I guess...
Look, man, I'm trying to avoid getting killed by Heartless. It's your job to avoid getting us killed by the internet.
Oh, right. I guess, like, it's not... I'm not defending how Tarzan portrays this. I'm just saying how Tarzan portrays it.
I mean, I should hope that's obvious by now.
Uh,
We haven't exactly been very pro Edgar Rice Burroughs so far.
So not only... At about the midway through the book, a group of black Africans show up in Tarzan's, I guess, island? I don't remember. But in the book, they are explicitly fleeing King Leopold II's genocide of Africans in the Congo. And they're kind of villains. Like, they're described as, like, cannibals, and Tarzan basically terrorizes them for a pretty significant portion of the book. It's deeply uncomfortable, especially since it's not like this is not by implication that, like, I'm not going, oh, well, if you squint, you can see that they're supposed to be from the Congo. It specifically says that they're from the Congo and they're fleeing the genocide there. It doesn't use the word genocide, but it says the terrors of King Leopold, basically. It's deeply uncomfortable to read.
You had the quote earlier, right? Do you still have it up?
Let me see if I do.
Because, like, I do want to... If we're getting into this, then I want to make it perfectly clear that this is not like, oh, hey, well, if you check the dates, this is going on at the same time. No. It is very explicit.
Yeah, I've got the quote up. Quote, to add to the fiendishness of their cruel savagery with the poignant memory of still crueler barbarities practiced upon them and theirs by the white officers of that arch-hypocrite, Leopold II of Belgium, because of whose atrocities they had fled the Congo Free State, a pitiful remnant of what had once been a mighty tribe.
So, like, at least Leopold is portrayed as, like, a shitty person.
Yes.
You can at least say that much for Tarzan, but also, yes, yikes.
Yikes. Big yikes. Like, most of the adaptations just, like, try to avoid touching upon that. I actually looked at the Wikipedia article for the 2016 adaptation, because I did not see it, and I don't think anybody saw it.
Until this moment, I was not aware that it existed. This is the first time I am hearing about this.
Yes. The 26 adaptation kind of tries to engage with it, which doesn't really, like, it's one of those things where it's like...
That is a bold move.
Like, I haven't seen it, I don't know whether it works or not, but I don't know that there's any way to fix it. Because that whole thing is just deeply, deeply uncomfortable. Like, Tarzan several times will describe himself as the killer of many beasts and black men.
I would not touch that if I were. Like, if someone asked me to make a Tarzan adaptation, then... yeah, I would not, This year, by the way, on an entirely different and much lighter note, there's a fun little thing here where we can play Magic Simon Says with, these Heartless, these surprisingly friendly Heartless. Where, yeah, you have to sort of interpret their gestures to figure out which spell they want you to cast on them. And if you get 3 of them right in a row, they will give you a little treasure. So, you know, the main challenge here is that in order to hit them with the spell properly, I have to be locked onto them. That takes control of the camera away from me. And so then I have to try and figure out how to see them properly with my party members in the way. Kingdom Hearts 1's party members are not the best. I accidentally hit him a split second after he stopped doing the gesture, so he interpreted it as an attack.
But, like, there's not really a way to faithfully adapt Tarzan that isn't just going to end in big yikes.
Yeah, no,
Like,
I mean... And what is Tarzan really? Like, besides the idea of someone raised by apes, like, what do you want from that property?
at this point, just the name. Like, the actual story isn't that great, and it's really troubling. Like,
yeah, it's not a comfortable story for modern audiences. Like
I think there is something to be done with, like, the feral child and, like, the whole fish out of water, like, thing. Like, that the best part, one of my favorite parts in Wonder Woman is where Wonder Woman, she's first in the 1900s England, and she, like, is so excited to have ice cream. She thinks the guy who sold it to her invented it. She's like, you should be very proud. Like, that's fun. Or even, like, you know, the whole feral child trope, like, that could be fun, but, like, you don't have to do Tarzan to do it anymore.
Yeah, well, I mean, Raised by Wolves has been a trope for, like, ever.
Like, Edgar Rice Burroughs was probably cribbing somewhat from the Jungle Book when he wrote Tarzan.
Yeah. Like, this has been a thing for a very long time.
Like, there are all sorts of mythical stories about children being raised by animals. Wikipedia has a list where they claim of non-fictional feral children. I don't know whether that's accurate or not, because my understanding was that most cases of feral children, it's either fictional, it's just or it's a case of neglect, or in one case it was this Native American girl who had essentially been abducted and taken to France and ran away and was able to live in the wilderness. So not really a feral child in any meaningful sense.
Right.
So I don't know about and, like, I looked at a few of the cases that Wikipedia had listed, and a couple of them just seem like it's neglect or homelessness.
Which, yeah, that's not really raised by wolves. That's just being an orphan.
Yeah. Because I'm pretty, like, there was a big thing in British colonial India where they had all these stories about Indian children being raised by wolves, but I feel like they were all determined to be hoaxes or didn't have any veracity to them. Like, there might be actual incidents of somebody being raised by animals in, like, a legitimate way, and it not just being a case of, like, extreme neglect. But I'm not sure whether there are or not. Especially, like, a human child takes a lot longer than any other animal to reach any sort of self-sufficiency.
Yeah, no, to go from infancy to, a fully self-sufficient 12-ish-year-old, that is like the entire lifespan of many mammals. Like, you could plausibly have a 12-year-old kid whose animal brother is like dying of old age as the kid becomes, you know, enough of an adult to plausibly self-sustain, which you could do something with, right? Like, that could totally be a thing in a fictional story.
Like I did read the article for one of the cases. It was about this kid in Russia who was allegedly raised by dogs. The actual case was that like he was in an urban area, and it seemed like he was just in a position of extreme poverty for a couple years with a dog pack, and he was like 4 to 6. So it seemed more like a case of like of homelessness than raised by animals.
Yeah, like, they call it raised by dogs, but what they meant was homeless and had a dog.
Yeah.
Basically. So the Tarzan world of Kingdom Hearts is really kind of a mess. Like, we have been totally ignoring it. That's not because, like ordinarily, I would want to do some amount of commentary on the game itself. There's not much to say here right now.
Like, when you listen to this podcast, part of it is me being off-brand Lindsay Ellis.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, if you're not here for that, then you're listening to the wrong show. But it's also like normally this is something that we would like segue back and forth between the game and the source material and stuff like that. The reason why we have discussed the game pretty much not at all since we got here, and like, I'm covering it now just for the sake of thoroughness, but it's because the game is doing almost nothing. Like, yeah, okay, I can make this do a thing. But yeah, the plot of the Tarzan world is basically wander around a jungle until you find the plot. That's kind of it. You know, there's a whole thing where, like, Clayton, the darkness in his heart attracts the Heartless at one point, but yeah. Which does sort of feed into how, you know, what plot do you salvage out of Tarzan? Well, you know, Kingdom Hearts... I don't think
Clayton's really a villain in the novel. He's there, but he's not really a villain. Also, we keep running into that cheetah, which reminds me of another part of Tarzan that's just yikes.
Oh boy.
Which... I'm not sure that Edgar Rice Burroughs ever met a woman.
Did they have them in Texas in the early 1900s? Were they allowed?
I almost question whether they did, because the way he writes women is like I get it's the 1900s, but it's also like, really? Like, so how do you think Tarzan's mother dies?
There's another one where, you know, I know the answer already, so I can make a joke guess, but
so
the thing is, I can't think of a joke guess that is remotely as ridiculous as the actual answer, so...
So some sort of animal, I don't remember if it's an ape or a cheetah, attacks their cabin, and defending, you know, baby Tarzan, Tarzan's mother shoots the animal, and then because of her weak womanly constitution, she dies from having shot an animal that was attacking her.
Which again, that sounds like a joke. That sounds like the sarcastic answer I would give to prompt you to give the real answer.
like we talking to Cam, we've compared it to Dracula, where like the writing of women in Dracula is not amazing, but like it makes sense that like you're a man in the late 1800s. This is probably the best you can write a woman. Like, you don't have access to a woman's interiority to write a woman well. But then Tarzan is like, I don't think you've ever met a woman. Like, I think you've heard them described. And, like, Jane is a complete screaming Mimi throughout the whole novel. Like, it's really embarrassing to read at this point.
Which is like, this guy was from Texas?
Yep.
Which, I am deeply disappointed that there is a Texan out there under the impression that, you know, women just die from the strain of killing an animal.
You think a Texan would know better?
Right? Alright, here we are. I think we found the plot. Yeah, we have to wander around, save a bunch of different apes from Heartless. We have to fight Sabor. We have to go save some more apes from some Heartless. Then we have to go fight Clayton. It really is. We just wander around near aimlessly while plot beats happen in our vicinity.
And you die.
Yeah. It's partly because I came to this a little bit early because I didn't want to finish up the Hercules world. So I'm like a level down. Plus, I'm not going and restocking on items all the time.
I mean, thankfully it was just this brief little cutscene.
Yeah. I'm getting worried just because there are some longer cutscenes that come immediately before boss fights, including one that's like particularly infamous to the point where if this Let's Play gets any kind of community around it, I guarantee you there will be people quoting the lines from that cutscene in the comments. Because they are burned into a lot of people's memory.
You might do some off recording leveling.
Yeah, like my first thought was, you know, it has been a while, but I am also, or at least I was at one point, very good at this game. So I think I'll be fine. But, you know, as we're getting into this, it's like, wow, yeah, my skills on this are actually quite rusty. I don't know if I'm going to be able to take these bosses on. Because they're all fair boss fights in this game, right? I can't think of a single one where you...
It feels cheap.
Yeah, so it's like, you can dodge all the attacks. In theory, you can do this entire game at level 1.
I feel, was this ape originally played by Rosie O'Donnell?
I believe so. She was played by someone famous.
I do feel like Disney made a lot of good choices in their adaptation, like just having big gorillas instead of some weird fantasy ape. Like,
yeah,
like it makes sense that like in the 1919 or whenever Tarzan was written, like they didn't really know much about gorillas and they were assumed to be like pretty violent. Like, but then post Jane Goodall going down and doing all her research, like the popular perception of gorillas has changed so much. You might as well just have be gorillas.
right.
Which the 1984 version, I don't know if they're supposed to be the mythical apes. They kind of look like just chimpanzees, but like they're clearly people in chimpanzee suits. Like, I'm not sure if they're supposed to be the mythical apes or if they're just supposed to be chimpanzees, but they're a little bit larger because they're people.
There was a weird moment, a weird sort of uncanny valley in film for a bit, where special effects had advanced enough that you were expected to actually, reasonably resemble the thing you were depicting. You no longer had that sort of theater suspension of disbelief where, you could put one tree on the stage and call yourself a forest and people would just roll with it. And so special effects had advanced by the 70s and 80s and 90s far enough past that people would no longer give you that suspension of disbelief. If you wanted your movie to have a scene in a forest, it had to be in an actual forest. Mott paintings were no longer good enough. But special effects weren't good enough that you could actually just, have dragons. And so for a second, fantasy became practically impossible.
There's another thing about Tarzan that kind of gets lost in the adaptations. Disney actually does this accurate to the book, that Tarzan's like pretty lean, sort of like cat-like. But especially in like the 40s adaptations with Johnny Weissmuller, which were sort of like the big adaptations, at least live action, he's much more barrel-chested, and that sort of was the popular image of Tarzan for a long time, that he's big and beefy instead of more gymnast-like. It's one of those changes that got made in the movie that sort of devoured the original book version, like how the Wicked Witch of the West, having green skin. In the book, she's just a normal white person, but she's also a Cyclops, and she has a magic helmet.
Just one of those normal white person Cyclopses.
Or Frankenstein having green skin and a flat head and being inarticulate. When in the book, he's kind of handsome. He looks a little ill. Like, his skin is kind of yellowish, but he's also completely articulate. He has, like, philosophical debates with Dr. Frankenstein.
Right.
But the version of him that's the popular consciousness is just sort of a horrific monster that of maybe, like, childlike intelligence at best.
Alright, I was hoping to squeeze all of Tarzan in here, but due in part to me getting smacked a couple of times, it looks like we are not going to be able to do the complete world, because we had one world per episode going for a hot second there, but we're still, I mean, we're not that far out. We're like 15-20 minutes out from the end here, but we are going to go ahead, call the episode here. So yeah, this has been a barrel of laughs.